The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local journalism today at chly.ca/donate. Local news doesn't survive without local support.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. Monday night, Nanaimo City Council voted in favor of a motion giving a new name to a Harewood Park that has roots in the area's agricultural past. Councillor Paul Manley brought forward a successful motion to name the park at 933 Park Avenue 5 Acres Farm Community Park. The city purchased the property there in 2019. Following a multi-year process that included public consultation, the city developed a plan for the area, which was approved at the beginning of this year. The plan includes protection of some wetland on the site, adding some trails, and maintaining the section used for urban agriculture. The Nanaimo Food Share has been leasing part of the site to use as a farm, where they run a variety of educational programs and grow food for their Good Food Box. More on that later on the show. 5 Acre Farms in Harewood date back to the 19th century. For more on their history, I spoke with Nanaimo Museum Coordinator Amy Greenaway. What is the significance of the 5 Acre Farm to the history of Nanaimo?
The name 5 Acres dates back to the late 1880s. Around that time, the Vancouver Coal Mining and Land Company, which was the company that owned a number of coal mines in Nanaimo, including the huge number 1 mine that was right downtown. Their manager, Sam Robbins, had planned to subdivide the land in what we now know as Harewood, subdivide it into 5 acre lots and to make that land available at a lease to own basis, in particular to support coal miners and their families. Coal was a commodity, so that meant that when coal was really valuable, as in it had a high value, that there was a lot of work, and when there was high demand, but when there was low demand or a lower value, there was less work. So work wasn't stable for miners. And the idea was that if they had a little bit of land, that they could have, they could grow fruits and vegetables, they could have apple trees, maybe a couple of chickens, maybe a cow, that would make them a little bit more self-sufficient to help them in the times when coal mining wasn't providing them as much of an income. The lease to own terms were basically you paid rent, for lack of a better word, and if you decided to leave and you didn't want to be there anymore, you could go and the company would pay you back for any improvements that you'd made on the property, like if you'd built a house or if you'd built some outbuildings. And this scheme went on for about a decade in the late 1800s.
So the company would give people a lease on a 5 acre farm. How maybe unprecedented was this kind of thing for the time?
It was certainly not typical in Nanaimo. This is the only one that I know of in this area. And I think that it was in sharp contrast to the competing coal mining company in Nanaimo at the time, which was run by the Dunsmuir family, who preferred to have company housing so that they could exert as much control as possible over their workforce. So I think that in comparison, it's an even sharper contrast. The focus was on miners and their families, but there were also a couple of really of bigger farms in 5 acres. One of them was the Dickinson Dairy Farm, which was located where John Barsby Secondary School is today, and it was one of the largest dairy farms in the region. The land there that the Vancouver Coal Mining and Land Company turned into 5 acres, there were some very beautiful, fertile land there already based on the care and nurture and management from Nanaimo for thousands of years. So it was a very natural place to have a lot of these farms at. The company had one of their own farms there up kind of more towards where Colliery Dam is today. And they grew feed for mine animals like mules and horses. They grew strawberries, which were really popular in the area. So there was quite a bit of farming going on in 5 acres 100 years ago.
Can you give me a sense of maybe how many of these 5-acre farms there were at maybe the peak?
I'm not sure how many. There's some really awesome maps available, like at the Nanaimo Archives. They've got some really great maps that show you exactly where the 5-acre lots were, but also some of the maps actually show who, it's written right on them, who owned the lot. So that information is out there. When I think of the early 1900s and like who was there, the 1901 census really stands out for me because that gives you a snapshot in time of who's living there and what they're doing. So when you go, there's pages of 2 or 3 pages of census for the 5 acres area. And when you go down the list of occupations, it's all farmers and miners for the most part. So there was quite a few of them there. Some people lived there like for generations, and some people were just there for a shorter time.
You talked about the fact that there were 2 competing coal mines in the area, and maybe the 5-acre farm is kind of indicative of some of the differences between them. Maybe 2 important characters to know: Samuel Robbins, Dunsmuir. Can you tell me a little bit more about that whole side of things?
Yes, Sam Robbins is a really fascinating figure in Nanaimo's history because of his approach to operating the coal mine. So he was a manager. He did not own the mine, but he was the person on the ground who was making all of the business decisions. And he, of course, he created the 5-acre lots. The miners in his mines were allowed to unionize. And so he was a lot more focused on having a stable workforce through having, stable circumstances. They could, speak directly to their employer through their union if they wanted to see changes at work. And then, of course, a stable home life means you've got a stable labor force in the sense that people aren't working for you for a short time and leaving. So there were definitely business benefits to that. When he retired in the early 1900s, there was a big party for him at Robbins Park, which is named after Sam Robbins. And it's at the corner of 5th and Park in Harewood. And that just speaks to how highly he was seen in his time in the community. The contrast to the Dunsmuir family, who own mines in Wellington and Extension, they preferred to have company housing because if they started having, if their labor force threatened to go on strike, then they could evict their whole family from their house, which of course gives them a high level of control. And they also absolutely refuse to acknowledge or recognize any unions. So I think that in some ways, the 5 acres speaks to the very different ways that running coal mines was approached in Nanaimo.
With the historical distance between then and now, is there anything we can say about how those two different styles worked out, or like the legacy they had in the community?
I think for me, when I look at the legacy of Sam Robbins versus Robert Dunsmuir and later his son James, is how did the community respond in their time? So there's Robbins Park, as I mentioned. Sam Robbins is also known for Robbins Garden, which was located right downtown near the number one mine where he lived, kind of at the end of Milton Street, on the ocean end of Milton Street. And he collected plants and trees from all over the world and made these beautiful gardens. And so there's just these different layers there where I think that really show how they were viewed, and there's not really much to recognize the Dunsmuirs, except for if you've lived in Nanaimo long enough, you usually have a few remarks after talking about the history of the Dunsmuirs and their legacy of building a castle and treating their compared to the way they treated their workers.
Now, what ended up happening to the 5-acre farm such that we're here now today talking about there's a park is going to be named 5 Acres Community Park, and everyone's saying, oh, this is one of the last sites that's left?
Yeah, I think that when I think about 5 acres, there's a really beautiful photo in the Nanaimo archives that was taken probably around the 1940s. And it's looking towards the mountain, and it's just all of these farms separated by fences. And when you look from the same vantage point today, of course, there's neighborhoods and subdivisions and some businesses in there, and it's all layered right on top of these farms. And so I think it's an interesting way to think about the past, is to, be on those spots and know that you're still standing on all of those fertile farmlands. Or maybe you live in Harewood and your house has all these old apple trees and you're not really too sure why. Well, maybe they're connected with 5 acres, or you're on the old company farm.
I wanted to play this clip from last night's council meeting where the mayor was making a joke, maybe taking a little bit of a cynical view towards the history, and just maybe get some of your take on it as a subject matter expert. Here we go.
This is an integral part of the industrial heritage and history of this community, 5 Acre Farms. I did teasingly say to Councillor Thorpe earlier when Councillor Manny was speaking, yes, they were very happy to have 5 Acre Farms so the miners wouldn't ask for a raise in their miserable wages working in the coal mines. They'd have to be more self-sufficient. That may be a cynical view of history, however.
What do you think? Cynical view of history? Fair comment? Is there any kind of context around that?
I think that when I reflect on the experiences of coal miners and their families, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, I should preface that with, I come from a coal mining family. My great-great-grandfather, Benjamin Greenaway, was a miner, and his son, James Greenaway, was also a miner. So I grew up hearing all of the stories about all of the people who were the villains in my family's history, who were the villains in many family histories. And I think that there is definitely a critique to be made of being a paternalistic employer. And rather than, there's so many layers to that as far as today, where we see so many people fighting for living wages. It really is important to see capitalism as it is capitalism, and maybe the contrast. There's, you can make things more difficult for your employees, or you can make it better for them, or you can pay them more, and they can make their own decisions for how their money is spent and how they live.
Does that maybe bring us back to the whole Robbins versus Dunsmuir two approaches? Like you say you come from a coal mining family, you heard the stories about the villains. Can you tell me maybe what in those stories makes someone a villain versus less of a villain?
This is one of those topics that could, I think that these are interesting conversations to have, because I think that they are so relevant to today, because the root of all of these, whether it's like 1901 or it's 2025, it's how are employees being treated? Are workers being treated with dignity? Are they receiving a living wage? And so I think that there's always a lot to unpack. And I do think that I wonder how Sam Robbins would have been viewed in his time if there wasn't that sharp contrast with the approaches of the Dunsmuir family. Like if he wasn't operating a mine in a community at the same time as these they're often referred to as like coal barons, would he look as benevolent, or would he just look like a guy who was managing a mine? I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of different conversation that could happen around that.
I think that is a really interesting idea to think about. Maybe bringing it back to the 5 Acres farm. So there's going to be this new community park. It's going to be in Nanaimo. If you were to go there and see the name, well, what does it make you think about and reflect on?
I think that reflecting on the land and our connections to the land are first and foremost. Also looking at the work of miners, the work of people in our community in the past, and also a reflection on how things have changed. So it was called 5 acres, varying forms of 5 acres, 5 acres, 5 acre plots, 5 acre lots, 5 acre district, up until the 1930s. And then later on, we really see the community being called Harewood. And in 1975, Harewood amalgamated with the city. So I think that it can be very powerful to be standing in a place like you're right on the land, you're right where the story happened, and just think about, that continuum. What happened in the past? How does that impact us today? How does it impact us to, be in those spaces? Are there lessons to be learned?
Were these good quality farms? Is there anything you can tell me about the farmland itself?
Yes. Yeah, they were excellent farms. The land was very fertile. The company farm had acres and acres of feed crops for mine animals. And there were a couple of larger poultry farms, a couple of pig farms. So it was quite diverse, the types of farming that were happening there, which I think is pretty reflective of the time where, people they're doing a lot of different things with the land. And there are still, you can see those remnants today. You see these nice lots having, an old apple tree or an old plum tree in the side that are date back to this time period.
Is there anything else you think it's important for people to know about the history and the legacy of these 5 acre farms?
I think that it's really important to understand the history of the place that you live. So if you're in Nanaimo, and particularly if you're in Harewood, to, reflect on where you are and the history of that land and your connection to it. And if you're really interested in this part of Nanaimo's history, I would encourage you to come and visit the Nanaimo Museum, particularly in the spring of 2026. We're planning an exhibit called Grow Nanaimo. which includes the history of 5 acres, but looks at a number of the other farms in the area, and also really importantly, looking at connections to the land and care of the land.
Amy Greenaway, thank you so much for taking the time.
You're welcome. It was great to chat.
Amy Greenaway is curator of the Nanaimo Museum.
Midcoast Morning is part of our nonprofit newsroom project, supported by listeners like you. Keep this program on the air by funding it today with a monthly sustaining donation at chly.ca/donate. We've got tote bags and shirts if you need an incentive.
We're focusing on the past and present of a newly renamed park on today's program. Monday night, Nanaimo City Council passed a motion from Councillor Paul Manley to name a park in Harewood 5 Acres Farm Community Park. Manley co-directed a 2019 documentary about the site and the history of 5 Acre Farms. That documentary was released prior to the city buying the property a few months later. The Nanaimo Food Share maintains an urban farm on a portion of the site located at 933 Park Avenue. I got in touch to find out a bit about the present of 5 Acres Farm Community Park.
My name is Jenny Wharton, and I'm the education manager at Nanaimo Food Share. I'm also responsible for looking over the farm, and I also do the Nanaimo CD Sunday.
And can you tell me what sorts of things is the Food Share using some of the land at 933 Park Avenue to do?
Sure. So Nanaimo Food Share leases 0.7 of an acre of the land that the city owns. We run all kinds of growing and cooking food education programming there. We have a community farm drop-in on Fridays from 10 to 2. During maximum growing season, we also have a farm stand that's open for the community. This food is all by donation, so anyone can come and take what they need. Right now, we're kind of leaning more into like a you-pick situation, so people can just come and fill their baskets and take whatever they like. So we do farm field trips there with the school district 68 and 69. We typically have all the students planting the entire farm there in the springtime, and it's a great experience for them to get to know their community and be involved in urban farm and their own food security. We host farm to fork cooking workshops there for their classes, or just any other community organizations or groups where you can, say, for instance, harvest some cabbage, make some sauerkraut right at the farm in our outdoor kitchen. It's a beautiful space to work and cook together. We do work parties, so other organizations or companies can come and lend a hand and just to get some volunteer time in. We have a grow food, get cooking spring break and summer camps, and those run all summer long, and they're just so fun. And I honestly think they're the best type of summer camp for kids possible. We have a farmer family play group. So that's more for like younger kids and families, and they can just come and chill. We lay out blankets and everyone just enjoys the space. We also have other organizations at the farm that have their own rows. We also grow 5 of our rows for our Good Food Box. And we also do the citizen seed trial. So there's all kinds of stuff.
It sounds like you're getting an awful lot of use out of that 0.7 acres of farmland. If someone is interested in the idea of community farming, urban farming, community food production, what are the ways that they might be able to get involved and participate in the process in some way, shape, or form?
So we have our open farm drop-in every Friday. So that's just open to all community members. We're looking at opening it up a second day also, or potentially on a weekend day, so more people could come that work during the week. Getting involved in volunteering in some of our programming is great. We always need an extra hand, or being involved in the other organizations that are at the farm too, and coming and being involved in their farm drop-ins when they come.
So Nanaimo City Council on Monday night, they voted in favor of a motion to rename the park 5 Acres Farm Community Park to recognize some of the history of the lands that were subdivided back in the late 19th century into these 5-acre farm sites. Do you have any reflections on just the idea of being one of the last of those sites to still be actively farming?
I am extremely excited to be involved. It's an honor to be able to give back to the community with this programming. We definitely need to keep it as a 5-acre area, no matter what we do with it. So the history in that area with food is massive, and it goes beyond just the 5-acre plots. The rolling foothills, now Harewood below Mount Wakasaya, were the resting grounds for Indigenous Nanaimo families, and hunting would happen up on the Mount Wakasaya. The 5-acre plots are the colonial version of the history of Nanaimo.
Is there anything else you think you'd like to let people know about what's going on, what the Food Share is doing in and around 933 Park Ave?
I just want to get more people involved. I really want to expand on our field trips there. A lot of schools don't have school gardens. We also do school garden facilitation, and we're only actively working in about 5 or 6 different elementary schools. So bringing the kids to our farm so they can learn how to grow their own food is super valuable. And there's fee barriers that teachers have in our district, which is totally understandable. So it'd be great to offer more things to them that are funded. So yeah, bringing more kids. I want more kids there.
Well, Jenny, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
Jenny Wharton is the Education Manager at Nanaimo Food Share. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and Arby Fruit is our technical advisor. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
This program gives thanks to the Nanaimo First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.